The blaring alarms cut through the training room, shattering the silence. The red lights painted the walls in an ominous hue, casting a shadow over the group of cadets as they scrambled to make sense of the situation. Cadet Emma Morales, still catching her breath from the last drill, wiped the sweat from her forehead and instinctively reached for her helmet. "All right, listen up, people." Lieutenant Hawkins barked over the intercom, his voice steady despite the panic in the air. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The Zentaari are here. Full combat readiness, now." The word Zentaari sent a ripple of tension through the room. The aliens had been an ever-present threat in the galaxy, brutal, relentless, and known for their savagery. Em clenched her fists, feeling the weight of their reputation. She was a cadet, just beginning to cut her teeth in this war, but this was real. She slipped her helmet on and quickly joined her squad, the others just as hurried, faces tight with nervous energy. Em's heart raced, but she steadied herself. She was here to fight, not to run. "Cadet Morales," a voice called out from behind. She turned to see Lieutenant Hawkins, his expression a mix of determination and concern. "Stay sharp. The Zentaari won't show mercy. You keep your team in line, don't let them freeze up. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Em said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in her mind. Her squad, the 7th, was a mix of new recruits and seasoned cadets. She was one of the youngest, but her tactical abilities had earned her respect. She knew their strength was in unity, and now was the time to prove it. The vanguard shook, a sudden, jarring impact that threw her off balance. "Brace for impact," Hawkins shouted, grabbing onto the nearest railing. "Captain's orders," another voice shouted from the comms, and Em saw the ship's engineers rushing down the hall. "We're under attack," Hawkins growled, striding forward, his eyes narrowed with focus. "We're not going down without a fight." Em's squad followed him to the nearest station, where the display screens were flashing with incoming data. The Zentaari had breached their outer defenses. The ship was in chaos, the once orderly corridors now alive with the sound of alarms, shouting, and running footsteps. "Defend the bridge," Hawkins commanded. "Form up, stay in pairs, and cover the halls. Move out." Em took her place at the back of the formation, her pulse pounding in her ears. They reached the narrow passageways near the bridge, where the enemy was likely to push first. It was cramped, the walls too close for comfort. "Keep your heads low. We don't engage unless we have to," Hawkins ordered. The cadets nodded, but the tension was palpable. Then came the explosion. It was a sound like nothing Em had ever heard, a deep, earth-shaking boom that rattled the vanguard to its core. The lights flickered. The floors beneath them trembled. There was no time to react. "Move!" Hawkins shouted, but it was too late. The Zentaari had breached the outer hull. Their massive warship had released wave after wave of combat drops, and their forces were already storming the ship. Em heard the unmistakable sound of heavy boots marching down the corridor. A squad of Zentaari soldiers rounded the corner, their hulking forms silhouetted in the dim lighting. Their armor was jagged and menacing, glowing with a sickly green hue. The first few seconds of silence were broken only by the ominous hum of their weapons. "Take cover!" Hawkins shouted. The cadets scrambled into defensive positions as the Zentaari raised their weapons. Em's breath caught as the first blast hit the wall near her, sending shards of metal and debris scattering. She ducked, her heart hammering in her chest, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Return fire!" Hawkins yelled. Em raised her weapon, aiming for the nearest Zentaari soldier. Her hand was steady, her mind calculating, but the enemy was fast. They were built for battle, with strength and speed far surpassing any human. But what they didn't have, what they couldn't understand, was that humans fought with a ferocity that came from survival, from the need to protect. She squeezed the trigger, and the shot flew true, striking a Zentaari soldier in the chest. He crumpled to the floor, but the others didn't hesitate. They charged forward, undeterred by the loss. "Keep pushing. We have to reach the bridge." Hawkins shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. They fought their way forward, each step forward earned at the cost of a fierce exchange of fire. M's pulse was a thundering rhythm in her ears, her thoughts racing as her squad pressed on. The Zentaari were relentless, not giving an inch as they advanced. But something shifted in M. The earlier fear, the dread that had clouded her thoughts, was fading. She was no longer just a cadet. She was a soldier. And the Zentaari would learn that humanity would not bend. The hallway felt like an eternity, but they finally reached the door to the bridge. Hawkins slammed his fist against the door panel, initiating the override. As the door slid open, they rushed inside. And that was when it happened. A Zentaari officer, larger and more imposing than the rest, stood before them, Captain Graux. His piercing red eyes locked onto Hawkins. "Human," Graux growled, his voice like gravel. "You are a pathetic species. You fight with the last of your breath, but it will be your last." M's blood ran cold, but she didn't falter. She raised her weapon, her grip firm. Graux's eyes flicked to her, and she saw the briefest moment of recognition. You think you can stop me?" he taunted, his massive frame blocking the door. Graux swung his hand out toward M, aiming to strike. She dodged just in time, but his sheer power sent her sprawling to the ground. A sharp pain shot through her wrist, he'd crushed her finger. She gasped in pain, but the anger quickly replaced the shock. She wasn't done. She wasn't broken. M rose to her feet, clutching her injured hand. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but her resolve was clear. "You'll regret that," M whispered, her voice steady. And with that, the fight truly began. The metallic groan of the vanguard reverberated through the hallways as M stumbled back, her injured hand cradled against her chest. The pain was sharp, intense, a reminder of the brutal force Graux had used. Her finger throbbed, but that was the least of her worries. The Zentaari captain's laughter echoed in her ears, a low, mocking sound that only fueled the anger growing inside her. "You'll regret that," she had muttered, but Graux had only smiled, a smile that promised death. Now, as the battle raged around her, M knew she had to move. She couldn't afford to waste time dwelling on pain. She had to survive. She had to fight back. Her squad was regrouping near the bridge, their positions haphazard but still functional. Hawkins was barking orders, his voice strained but authoritative, as the cadets formed a loose perimeter. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of blaster fire. Every breath felt heavy, every movement laced with a sense of impending doom. "M," Hawkins called, his voice cutting through the chaos, "stay with me. We need to get to the command center, hold them off until reinforcements arrive." M nodded, still trying to shake off the shock of her injury. She adjusted her grip on her weapon, trying not to let the pain distract her. As much as her hand burned, her mind was sharp, and that was all she needed. They moved in unison, swift and efficient, down the narrow corridors of the vanguard. The ship had been hit hard, its defensive systems failing in the wake of the Zentaari assault. The lights flickered and dimmed, and every corner seemed to hide a new threat. M's breath was ragged as she rounded a corner, her injured hand now held against her side. She couldn't let herself think about it. If she did, it would break her. The squad was close now, nearing the communications bay. But as they approached, something felt off. The air felt heavier, thick with tension. She exchanged a glance with Hawkins. "Cover the door," he whispered, his eyes scanning the shadows. "On my mark." Before M could react, the door to the communications bay opened with a hiss, and two Zentaari soldiers poured into the corridor, their weapons aimed and ready. Hawkins reacted instantly, his blaster firing in quick succession. The first Zentaari soldier crumpled to the floor with a shriek, his body twitching in a final, desperate spasm. The second soldier fired back, narrowly missing Hawkins. "Push!" Hawkins yelled, leaping forward as he shot again. M's heart raced as she followed, her weapon raised, but the Zentaari soldier was quick, ducking behind a bulkhead. She could hear his footsteps, faint but steady. They were hunting them. "We've got to keep moving," M said, her voice tight. If we don't secure the comms bay, we're done for. Agreed, Hawkins muttered. You're with me. The rest of you, hold the rear. They rushed toward the door, but just as they neared, a third Zentaari soldier stepped into view, blocking their path. He was even larger than the others, his body encased in thick, jagged armor. His eyes glowed a malevolent shade of yellow, his face twisted in a snarl. M's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a brute, a warrior, not just a soldier. She could feel the weight of his presence like a storm brewing. Hawkins didn't hesitate. He fired, but the Zentaari deflected the blast with ease, raising a massive energy shield that crackled with power. Damn it, Hawkins swore, his frustration palpable. We can't let him get any closer. M's mind raced. They needed a plan, fast. She scanned the environment, searching for any advantage. A faint light flickered above the brute's head, the overhead lights casting a brief reflection off the sharp edges of his shield. She acted without thinking. Her wounded hand ached with each movement, but she didn't care. She dashed to the side, her boots skidding against the slick floor. Without warning, she fired 2 quick shots, not aiming for the brute's chest but for the controls on the far wall. Sparks flew as one of the panels shorted out, and the lights above flickered again. For a split second, the brute hesitated, his glowing eyes darting up toward the malfunctioning lights. It was enough. M surged forward, her legs carrying her faster than she'd ever thought possible, and with a grunt, she slammed into the soldier's side, using her weight to push him off balance. Hawkins wasted no time. He lunged forward and fired point-blank into the soldier's exposed side, and the Zentaari crumpled with a roar. M stepped back, panting, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as she took in the scene. But their victory was short-lived. The ship's comms buzzed to life, a sharp voice crackling through the static. All units, fall back to the hangar. Reinforcements inbound, Zentaari flagship approaching. Reinforcements? M muttered. Her mind was racing now. They weren't just fighting off a small raiding party. The Zentaari were mobilizing for something much larger. The Vanguard couldn't withstand an invasion of that scale. We need to move, now. Hawkins shouted, looking between the door and the comms console. M felt the weight of the decision settle on her. The comms bay wasn't just for sending messages, it was their last line of defense. If the Zentaari got control of it, they'd have the upper hand. She couldn't let that happen. Cover me, she said, her voice sharp. Hawkins nodded grimly, his blaster aimed at the door. M sprinted to the console, her wounded hand burning, but she ignored it. Her fingers danced over the keys, activating the ship's emergency communications protocol. The Zentaari had already hacked into the system, but she could still send a distress signal, a call for help. Her breath quickened as she typed, each movement feeling like a battle in itself. The screen flickered once, then came to life. A red light blinked as the system powered up, just as the door behind her exploded with the force of another Zentaari charge. She barely had time to react. Time's up. Hawkins yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos. With a final click, the distress signal went out. M turned, her weapon raised, but her heart was already hammering. The Zentaari were coming. And now, the fight was far from over. The door to the comms bay groaned under the weight of the Zentaari assault. M's pulse raced as she turned to Hawkins, their eyes meeting for the briefest of seconds. Without another word, they both took their positions, Hawkins at the door, M by the console. The heavy footsteps of the incoming Zentaari echoed through the hallway, closer now. She could feel it in her bones, their brute strength, their relentless thirst for domination. Get ready, Hawkins muttered, his grip tightening on his weapon. M nodded, her breath steady despite the rising tide of fear. She couldn't afford to think about what was coming. She had to focus, to survive. The door split open with a sudden, explosive force, sending a burst of air into the room. M braced herself, raising her blaster, and Hawkins fired, the shots piercing the first Zentaari soldier's armor. He staggered but didn't fall. It was chaos in the hallway. Zentaari soldiers flooded the room, their heavy weapons roaring to life. Hawkins fired again, but the Zentaari closed in, their shields absorbing the blasts, their yellow eyes burning with murderous intent. Hawkins didn't flinch. He was a seasoned soldier, unshaken by the carnage unfolding before him. "Hold them off!" Hawkins shouted, his voice a commanding force amid the madness. M squeezed the trigger, sending a shot through the air. It hit one of the soldiers square in the chest, but the armor absorbed the blast, and the soldier remained standing. Her hands shook, the pain from her broken finger still gnawing at her, but she steadied herself. They couldn't retreat. Not now. A Zentaari soldier charged forward, his large form moving with terrifying speed. He raised his weapon, aiming at Hawkins. M reacted instinctively, jumping in front of him and firing. The soldier's shield absorbed the shot, but it was enough to push him back. Hawkins took the opening, firing a blast that sent the soldier flying back, crashing into the wall. "Nice shot," M panted, still trying to catch her breath. Hawkins gave her a sharp look, his face grim. "We're not out of this yet." More Zentaari poured into the room. M's mind raced. There were too many of them, and their weapons were overwhelming. She needed a way out. She needed a plan. The comms bay was their last line of defense, and she couldn't let it fall. Not after everything they'd fought for. She ducked behind a console, her mind ticking like a clock. The emergency systems were still operational. She could lock down the bay, seal them in. But it would buy them only a few minutes, maybe less. The Zentaari would eventually break through. "You know how to shut it down?" Hawkins asked, his voice tight, as he continued to fire. M nodded, glancing at the control panel. "Just need to activate the override. Give me a second." Hawkins didn't wait for confirmation. He kept firing, pushing the Zentaari back as they closed in. M's fingers danced over the controls, her focus narrowing to the task at hand. She needed to act fast. "M, now!" Hawkins yelled, his voice strained as the door to the comms bay rattled under another series of heavy impacts. The Zentaari were breaking through. She punched in the override code, and the system beeped in response. A red light flashed across the room as the emergency lockdown sequence initiated. "Yes!" M shouted, relief flooding through her. But before they could celebrate, the room shook with another explosion. The Zentaari weren't finished. They were determined to breach the bay at all costs. "Stay back!" M shouted, grabbing a blaster from a fallen Zentaari soldier. She had to do something. She couldn't just hide behind a console and wait. She couldn't let Hawkins face them alone. The door buckled under the impact, and M knew they didn't have much time. She stood and fired, her aim true this time. The soldier in front of her fell to the ground with a heavy thud, but there were more. Too many more. From the corner of the room, M saw the leader, the hulking figure of Graux, the Zentaari captain, stepping through the smoke and chaos. His yellow eyes locked onto hers, and a twisted smile spread across his face. "You," he growled, his voice low and guttural, "I thought you would have been broken by now." M's heart thudded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. "I'm not broken yet," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Graux stepped closer, his massive frame towering over her. His weapon was raised, a deadly hum of energy pulsing in his hand. "You're nothing but a child playing at war," he sneered. "Humanity is weak. You are weak." "No," M said, her voice cold. "We're just getting started." Before Graux could react, Hawkins lunged, tackling the Zentaari captain to the ground. They tumbled, Graux roaring with fury as he tried to shake Hawkins off. The two combatants were locked in a brutal struggle, each struggling for dominance. M watched in horror as Graux's massive hand reached for Hawkins's throat. Hawkins gasped, his face turning red as Graux squeezed, his fingers like iron around his neck. The room seemed to slow. M's blood ran cold, but then something inside her snapped. She couldn't let Hawkins die. She couldn't let humanity be crushed under the weight of this monster. She gritted her teeth and charged. She didn't think. She just acted. In one swift motion, she dove for Grox's exposed neck, using every ounce of strength she had left. Her broken fingers screamed in protest, but she didn't care. She wrapped her hand around Grox's throat, her fingers digging into the cracks in his armor. Grox roared in pain, his grip loosening around Hawkins's neck. Hawkins gasped for air, rolling away from the beast. But Em wasn't done. With a final, desperate twist, she slammed her knee into Grox's side, using her entire body weight to force him off balance. The Zentaari captain staggered back, and in that moment of vulnerability, Em did what no one expected. She grabbed Grox's head and twisted, using every muscle in her body to snap his neck. The sound was sickening, like a branch breaking in the wind. Grox's body fell limp, his massive form crumpling to the floor. The room fell silent, the battle halting for just a second as the realization of what had just happened sank in. Em stood over the Zentaari captain's corpse, breathing heavily, her pulse thundering in her ears. Hawkins was still gasping for air, his throat raw, but he was alive. "I guess humanity's not so weak after all," Em said, a wry smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Hawkins looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and admiration. "No, Em. We're not weak." They stood together, staring at the wreckage of the room, knowing this battle was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Em felt like they had a chance.